Welcome to Seminar Sunday, District 21's weekly episodic webinar series. Great to have you on the line today, and today I am sharing with you time management, a very important thing to everybody really, regardless what you are doing, whether that be at work, at home, or elsewhere. This is a weekly series that goes based on a number of topics, some leadership or communication skills, and others which are focused more on your Toastmasters Club experience. As I mentioned, this particular episode, we're covering the topic of time management. On the screen, if you're joining us on the computer, you'll be able to see different topics that we plan to cover in the coming weeks. So we've got Make Your Guests Feel Welcome next week, followed by some free Toast host information, which will be great for those that are looking to beef up their website. So how this works is I'm going to present some content. Hopefully I've got some content that you're really going to enjoy, but I also want to encourage every one of you to interact through the chat and the question and answer. At the top of your screen, you'll have an area to ask questions. And on the side, this is of course, assuming you're joining on a computer, you'll have an attendee chat area. Please feel free to throw comments, ideas, questions in there, and we'll discuss them as we come up and it's a great opportunity to guide the conversation towards whatever everyone's goals are from this session. So that's what I've got to start. What I really like about this is the fact that time management is really relevant to all of us, regardless if it's in your club, in your workplace, or just in your life in general. We've all got different things that we are working on in our lives, and effective use of time is definitely right up there in priorities, or you're not getting everything you want done. One of the two, right? So objectives of this session. Number one is identify what time management is, uncover the challenges related to it, and of course, share ideas. And this is definitely where I'd love to hear some of your ideas as well. It's not all mine. I'm not the single source of truth. Definitely not named Encyclopedia Michael. So if you've got some ideas, then please chip in anytime through the course of this webinar. So I went, when I first started planning, I went to a website called Psychology Today and found a definition of time management. I'm going to read it out. I really like it. And just in case folks are joining on the phone, you won't be able to see this on the screen right now, so I'll read it. It says, time management is the ability to plan and control how you spend the hours in your day to effectively accomplish your goals. Poor time management can be related to procrastination as well as problems with self-control. Skills involved in managing your time include planning for the future, setting goals, prioritizing tasks, and monitoring where your time actually goes. So that is the definition based on Psychology Today. Along the course, while I was researching and preparing for this session, I found many similar definitions, and that one I just liked because it encompassed really everything. What the impacts are if you don't manage your time well, how you can manage your time, and the monitoring piece is another big piece, because I suspect many of us, and myself included, I'm guilty of this many times, don't necessarily have a log or something of where I'm spending all my time. So I have ideas, and I could give a suggestion to folks. So, well, I spend approximately this much of my time doing X project or whatever it happens to be, but I can't definitively say, essentially minute by minute, what I'm using my time for. So hopefully I'll gain from this as well. Time is indeed our most precious resource. This is the one thing that we have complete or almost complete control of. And, if you're working, for example, in the workforce somewhere, you don't necessarily have the control over how much you're going to make, or necessarily how you're going to spend your time, but as soon as you leave that workplace, you've got a huge amount of time, should be at least 16 hours a day, that you can utilize to your full advantage. And that's why we really have to find ways to manage our time effectively in order to ensure we're living life to the fullest, for lack of better terminology. So how do you find it in terms of difficulty in managing your time? I found this image, and this really spoke to me a little bit, because I find that when I have more things coming in to the inbox than going out, I personally feel like I use my time less effectively and struggle more with managing time, ironically enough. Just for whatever reason it happens to be, when everything's cool as a cucumber, I can manage time pretty well. But when it comes to situations like this, where you've got a jam-packed inbox and the work doesn't seem to be leaving as quickly as it's coming in, it just seems to cause me to get almost distracted by the amount that's coming in. Does anybody else experience similar, or do you have a way that you can just manage time? Sean has mentioned basic prioritization is my preferred method, and using a calendar. Absolutely, absolutely important. Both of those, calendar or tools that you can implement, particularly with technology. There's a lot of good resources out there, are really effective, and we all have to prioritize in life. That's one of the things that if there's one skill you should be good at, it's prioritization, and that will take you a long way. Jim has mentioned I use David Allen is Getting Things Done system. Like to learn more about that. I'm not very familiar with that system, so I'd love to learn some more. And if you want to share some more in the chat, that would be fantastic, Jim. Documenting critical meetings in your calendar to know you're doing when. Don't let emergencies drive your schedule. Absolutely, and that's one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit as well, because there's an analogy that I'm going to get into about dealing with the biggest and most important things. And, you know, we've all got these little emergencies. There was a really good course I took a couple of years ago that bucketed items into, you know, there's the urgent versus the important, and all those types of things. There's a difference between urgent and important. And if it's urgent and not important, it doesn't mean that it should be done right away. So here's some of the benefits of good time management that we get. And I personally am a huge fan of all of these benefits that you get: greater productivity and efficiency, a better professional reputation, less stress, and that's huge. We all live, especially in this modern day, very stressful lives. We've got so many things coming at us, and if you can manage your time, then you'll have a lot more time to do things you want to do, and that could probably include sitting on a beach or going out for a nice walk in nature, or whatever it happens to be. Increased opportunities for advancement and greater opportunities to achieve important life and career goals. So all these are huge benefits that you get by managing time well. And I wanted to highlight that first. That's my motivation to manage my time better, and hopefully that you find some of those are beneficial for yourself as well. So how do we make better use of our time? Well, this is, first of all, where I want to start out with a great video from a course that I took. And I don't know how this is going to work on, I've never done this on the webinars where we've played a video. If it works well, great. If it doesn't, then I encourage you to watch this video. It is from a course that I took a couple of years ago. And it's all about time management and how it kind of feels. Hopefully this resonates with you.
Today's workplace is a battlefield. As soon as you enter, you are fighting to survive an onslaught of urgent tasks, emails, meeting requests, and deadlines. It's like an avalanche of gravel that threatens to bury you alive. And just when you think you dug yourself out, it starts all over again. And it's not just at work. The gravel threatens our personal lives as well, distracting us from key relationships and things that matter most. So we try to sort the gravel, label it, and organize it. We discuss it in meetings, often missing issues that are far more important. What extraordinary things could you achieve if only you could break out? Ready for a change?
So that is a video from the 5 choices of extraordinary productivity. It's a Franklin Covey course that I took a couple of years ago through my workplace, and it just really connected with me that sometimes that's how it feels, is that you've got so many things coming at you that it's difficult to keep up. And if it's, you know, in your work or your Toastmasters or your club setting, whatever it happens to be, then it really becomes a significant challenge, because we all need that time to decompress and relax and do some things that we enjoy, even if that means, you know, for example, we're club president and we love doing that, but we still need some things outside of that as well to be very successful. So I like that video, and it reminds me of, in the course, it talks about these pebbles that are coming at you. And it pointed out, if you have a container, let's say you put a bunch of pebbles in first, and then you go and put bigger rocks in, you won't be able to fit those bigger rocks. But if you start with the bigger rocks and then put in the pebbles, everything fits. And that's how we have to manage our time, is dealing with those bigger rocks. And that's my next slide, actually, dealing with the bigger rocks first. If you come at whatever you're dealing with by, okay, is this important and urgent? Well, that's probably a bigger rock that you need to deal with, because it's important, has to be dealt with. On the other hand, is it urgent but it's not important? Well, then that's certainly more of a gravel type thing, or something very small, a small stone at the best, right? Really important to prioritize based on that. So a couple of ideas that I had here based on that was doing a daily and weekly plan to determine what priorities are, to make sure the most important tasks are completed early on. So what I mean by that is, some of the most effective leaders I've spoken to have shared their secrets, and one of the ones that I appreciated the most was taking some time out on your Sunday evening to plan your week ahead. And to me, it doesn't matter if you're in the workforce or you're outside the workforce or whatever you happen to be. It doesn't matter if you're retired or you're working or you're in school. By taking Sunday evening and planning your week ahead, it helps you focus on what are your priorities for the week. What do you absolutely have to get done on Thursday, for example? I find by doing this, it really helps you set the tone for the week. Okay, this is going to be a busy week, and therefore I need to be even more careful how I manage my time. Or actually, this week looks pretty good, so I'm going to bump a few things up a little earlier in the week, and therefore by the end of the week, I'm just going to be able to kick back and relax, or whatever the situation happens to be. Of course, with a weekly plan, it doesn't just work. Having, you know, 1 week, you set it on Sunday night, and you forget it. By taking 30 minutes every day to actually break it down a little bit more into a finer plan and revise things that need to be revised as the week goes along, it's going to be even more effective. 30 minutes is plenty of time for that. 30 minutes is well worth the investment, because you will certainly gain more time in return by taking that 30 minutes. And depending on what type of person you are, you could do that the night before, or you could do that in the morning. For myself personally, I'd probably rather do that the night before, because by the time I get up and I get ready and I head out to work, I'm already full tilt, full speed, and it doesn't stop until after this webinar. And then actually I've got another call. So after that call, it'll finally stop again, and I'll be able to kind of reflect and start to think about the next day. But for you, if, for example, you get up early enough and you've got kind of a more slow start to the day, you may prefer doing it in the morning, and that way you have an idea how your day is going to go. Doesn't really matter how you do it, as long as you take that 30 minutes each day to think about what needs to be accomplished that day. And to the second point on the slide, for those of you joining on the computer, doing your biggest task in the morning just to get it over with. We're professional procrastinators is what we as humans tend to be. And if you are a procrastinator, you're going to want to say, you know what, I'm going to get this task done, but I'm going to push it off to tonight, or I'm going to push it off to this afternoon, or maybe even the next day. No, by doing it early on, there's two benefits. Number one, now you've got time for all the gravel once you deal with that biggest task. You're able to move on and focus in on that task, and not only does it get done, which is the most important thing about those big tasks, but there is a sense of relief you're going to get. And that's where it goes back to that benefit of the lower stress, because you're going to feel that stress inside of, I've got this big task ahead of me, over my head, and keep thinking about it, reflecting on it. If you just get it out of the way, knock it out of there, and move on, then you're not going to have that to worry about. You're going to be relaxed, because, okay, now I know at least I've dealt with the biggest thing I need to do today. You've got a sense of accomplishment, and you're moving on to stuff that it doesn't really matter if you get it done today, but by getting it done as well, you're feeling even better, because you're thinking, great, now I'm freeing up my capacity to, go on a skiing trip on Friday, for example, whatever you happen to be doing. So that is the first, and I think the most important thing to effective time management is it gets back to what the folks in the chat were saying there, like Sean, thank you very much, and David, prioritizing your tasks and then dealing with it. And by having a plan for it, dealing with it first thing, you're moving on to the lower priority tasks earlier than if you switch it up and try to deal with some of the small things. Because it's easy to say, oh, well, you know what, these tasks are going to take me a minute, I'm just going to deal with 5 of these. Well, that's a good feeling perhaps, but then in the back of your mind, you're still reflecting on that large task. Second thing is your brain. And this is also really important. I mean, it's the usual suspects, though. Not going to surprise you here by saying exercise, getting sleep, and what you maybe don't think about, though, is practicing skills you don't do at work. And at work could be, at your workplace. It could be in your Toastmasters club. Let's say you've been, club treasurer for a number of years, or whatever it happens to be. You're using those skills all the time, but is there skills that you're not using that perhaps when certain tasks come across your desk, it becomes more challenging for you? So by not only doing it more often, but getting that exercise and sleep that helps with almost everything, you're really helping your brain keep healthy and engaged and ready for the challenge of whatever tasks you have ahead, and focus on what are my priorities for the day and how do I plan my day. Second thing, and it sounds completely against the grain when it comes to the time management aspect, is taking breaks. While I was preparing for this, I found some information that suggested if you work for 90 minutes at a task, you need a break. You can only focus for about 90 minutes. So if you try to focus for 2 hours, by that hour and a half in, you're probably going to start to drift away already. And once that starts to happen, then you're going to become less efficient anyways. So you might as well go take a walk or do something else that you want to do for 10, 15, 20 minutes, however long you need to get your brain back into a state where it can focus again for another 90 minutes. So keep that in mind, and keep in mind this is also for you doing a task. If you're presenting to a group of people, for example, it's not the same thing. You can't do 90 minutes. Humans, unfortunately, have the attention span of a goldfish when it comes to being presented to. So you really want to break it down to 17 minutes or less if you were doing a presentation. But the 90-minute rule is more for you if you're hunkered down and working on a task, whatever the task happens to be. So keep that in mind. Scheduling. So this goes, there's definitely some similarities here between what we talked about, the first thing about big rocks, but I did want to reiterate some things. And the most important, of course, is using a calendar, just like mentioned in the chat there as well. It's so important to keep some sort of calendar. So you may have good memory, but if you're trying to remember 10,000 tasks that are coming up in the next couple of weeks, you're going to get overwhelmed with it. Your brain is going to get full, and it distracts you from the things that you need to do. So by keeping a simple calendar, that calendar can do the heavy lifting for you. And I recommend using a program like Microsoft Outlook or even Google Calendar. There's lots of online programs you can use. There's smartphone applications, hundreds of options out there in the web for you to take advantage of. If you prefer to use pen and paper, that's completely fine as well. You could print off a month by month. You could take a calendar with you, one of those daily planner books, whatever works for your individual needs. But absolutely, whatever you do, have a calendar so nothing slips past you, and you've got that offloaded out of your brain and onto paper. And when you're doing your daily and weekly planning, you see that on the calendar. So you're not forgetting that it's coming up. You know it's coming up. The exact time, you don't necessarily need to worry about until the day of, unless you're trying to plan some other things, in which case you go back to the calendar to integrate whatever you're trying to do in. The other thing that's really good about it is that you can place limits on time the activity is going to take. So it's easy to lollygag, and and this is something I'm guilty of doing from time to time as well, where you just think, okay, well, I don't have anything scheduled for after this, so I'm just going to go ahead and do this, this, and this, and an activity that could take you, say, 30 minutes ends up taking you closer to an hour, and you think, well, holy smokes, how did that happen to me? So that is really important to have that calendar, not only for keeping track of those activities, but also for having a time limit on your activities, because you're going to effectively use your time more if you schedule the time you think something's going to take. And if it takes a bit longer, you can always go back to it. If you've got nothing booked after whatever the task happens to be, I mean, you could overflow a bit, but at least then you're feeling that, okay, well, this is something I planned would take me 30 minutes. It's now been 35 minutes. I really need to figure out how I can get this done a little bit more efficiently, and helps you record it as well. This is an ironic task. Don't take on too much. This is something that we tend to be guilty of. We all tend to say, oh yeah, I'll take that on. And then next thing you know, you're overloaded. You've got all this work in front of you and you just can't keep up with it. And there's that old saying as well, about giving, if you want something done, give it to somebody that's busy. Well, unfortunately, that works against good time management, because I've actually seen that myself in Toastmasters, as a matter of fact. There's some people that I've worked with, and they're amazing people. I absolutely love them to death, but they don't know how to pronounce the word that's spelled N-O. And when they don't know how to pronounce it, what happens is people come to them left, right, and center, ask them, hey, would you like to do this? Would you like to do that? And of course they're, oh, yes, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to do this, etc. And then sure enough, the tasks are not getting completed in either a timely manner, or if they're getting done in a timely manner, they're not being done quality. So just something to keep in mind when you are working with a team and you're trying to give something to somebody that's quite busy. Make sure they're not taking on too much. And same for yourself. Are you saying yes too much? Because that makes it you're not doing a service by overcommitting yourself. So it's okay to be busy. If there's something you really need to concentrate on project-wise, it's okay to shut down email or ignore phone calls for the most part. As long as you're not doing it for extended periods of time. But if you need, okay, well, you know what, today I have this really important thing, why not just say, all right, for the next 30 minutes or hour, I'm not taking any calls. I'm not going to check my emails. You can just focus in and get the work done, because distractions are so challenging for us, right? As soon as it's easy to get distracted. Something that will take 30 minutes can easily take a couple of hours because, oh, well, I need to go and do this, or I need to go and do that. I remember the first time I worked from home, for example, for my workplace. I sat down and I got my computer loaded up, and then I thought, oh shoot, I should put on a load of laundry. And then wait a second, I'm working. And just shifting that mindset to, okay, you know what, I have to hunker down and work here. And it's the same thing though, if you've got, emails coming in, and especially if you've got a program like, Outlook or Mail open, and you've got those pop-ups coming with different emails, and some of them quite attractive subject lines. Ooh, I want to read this or learn about this. It takes you away from perhaps what you need to be doing. So really important, take that time if you need it. Shutting down the program itself can help, because then you don't necessarily know those emails are coming in. They'll still be there in half an hour or an hour whenever you finish your task. As long as you're not expecting an urgent phone call or something, then you should be good to do that. The other side of it is multitasking. That can be very distracting, and it will likely take more time to do the two tasks than it would individually. So that's not always the case, but if you're like me at all, I find it very challenging, for example, if I'm on a phone call with somebody, to also be doing X, Y, and Z. It's much nicer for me to, I can take that phone call, and perhaps, I can clear out some junk emails or something like that, perhaps, but I'm certainly not going to read and process and deal with a complex situation by email, or read a newspaper, for example, while I'm on a phone. And I suspect many people are just like that. It's very distracting, and if you try to read the newspaper while on the phone, for example, you're going to end up switching somewhere along the way to focusing more on the newspaper, and then missing something in the phone call. And of course, that can be a little embarrassing when somebody's talking to you and you say, oh, sorry, didn't catch it, too busy in the newspaper. Using technology to your benefit is one of the other things that I think is really critical for time management. There is lots of great tools out there on the interwebs. There's programs like Outlook. There's project management software. OneNote is something that's really popular. It's a product from Microsoft. And I know a lot of people that have started using it and they absolutely love it. They swear by it. So just a couple of ideas there that, of course, there's lots of other technology that can benefit you in planning your day or keeping some sort of record of what you've been up to. So that's a huge thing that I absolutely love. That being said, I'd be curious, from your perspective, can you share with me some other technology? I'm just going to give maybe 30 seconds or so here in the chat. You can maybe share with us what kind of technology you're using that helps you manage your day or whatever it happens to be you're looking to manage. So Sean finds Outlook to be handy for him. Nicholas says Basecamp. I never heard of that program. Can you tell me a little bit about Basecamp? Google Calendar. Sean mentioned that he used to use the paper-based system called Time Text, but that was two generations ago. David uses a to-do list on paper. Yeah, I find for myself personally, I start that and then halfway through I kind of give up. So I wish I could get better at that. I'm using technology for sure. Outlook seems really popular. Thank you, Nicholas, for the link. I will certainly take a look at it, get an idea more about what Basecamp is. I made the bold assumption that you were not referring to the Pathways Basecamp. Okay, so it looks like an interesting software that can be used to plan your day. The other thing that I noted here, of course, the second bullet point is project management software. And that is really powerful. In fact, we haven't been using it recently for district leadership, but we usually use a project management tool for planning conferences. And I believe Asana offers free, I can't remember up to how many users it is, but it doesn't even cost, and it's a great project management software. There is also, there's one that I keep seeing advertisements for. I haven't had a chance to look into, but it's monday.com. So I don't know if anybody's got experience with programs like that, but that certainly helps you break, or Trello's another one, breaking up projects into kind of tasks that need to be accomplished in order to deliver on that project, who's responsible, deadlines, all those types of things. So you can kind of have multiple things in the pipeline heading down, but from that list that you're working towards, you know when everything's due and when you're coming up to a task, and you know who's going to get it after you finish. So that can help you with prioritization as well. I mean, if it's a critical component that you're expected to deliver on and you see that there's a bunch of people waiting after you for next portions of that task, for example, then you know that, hey, you know what, I probably want to put that as a pretty high priority because people are relying on me finishing that, versus one where perhaps you're at the end of the chain and it's just a sign off on something, for example. Well, that's probably not very high priority, because once your signature is done, the task is, the case is closed, or whatever it happens to be. David's used MS Project. There is a fee for it, yes, and you know, it's incredible. I think a lot of people look at Microsoft's Office suite that, you know, includes Outlook and Word and Excel and PowerPoint, but don't necessarily recognize some of the other great programs that they put out, like OneNote, for example. Project's another one. Visio's another one for doing flowcharts. So there's the different programs that they offer, and they are quite powerful. But of course, Microsoft does charge licensing fees for all their software that they offer. Definitely worthy of consideration if you are, particularly if you have your own business or you're doing something where you have a number of projects to lead, and it's worth checking out. At the very least, one of the things I always do when I'm curious about something, I look it up on Google or even YouTube and kind of just see, okay, well, what does this actually look like? And once you've got an idea what it looks like and feels like, you can decide, is that for you or maybe not, and move on. Especially if you're going to pay for something, you want to make sure it's going to work for you. You'd hate to fork out potentially hundreds of dollars for something and it's little to no use to you. And there's definitely free options, but usually when they're free, they have some sort of restriction. And as I said, Asana, I know, has some sort of limitation. Off the top of my head, couldn't tell you what it is, but if you had a team of, for example, 100 people, it's not going to be an option for you unless you pay and kind of get the full featured version, which in some cases are better, is better as well. It's much like the software we use. We use AnyMeeting for this webinar. There is free option in Zoom, for example, but that limits us to 40 minutes. So that wouldn't quite work for us. In some cases, we're at the 40-minute mark right now, actually, which is interesting. I could potentially fit this into 40 minutes, but it doesn't allow us to have as much dialogue and share some additional ideas that we sometimes uncover by having the hour. So here's some places I particularly found useful when researching on time management. Franklin Covey has that course that I mentioned, 5 Choices to Extraordinary Productivity. If you have an organization that offers a lot of programs, I highly recommend checking it out. They do have some videos on YouTube as well that you can definitely watch and enjoy. You're not going to get, of course, the full benefit of the program by reading up on it online, but I do encourage you to read up, take a look, see what you think about it, because there's certainly some great things out of that program. And once again, that kind of gets into that quadrant that I talked about, where this particular course talked about the 4 different boxes. So you've got, important, unimportant, and urgent, not urgent, or something along those lines. And because you've got those 4 boxes, you kind of categorize your tasks by where it belongs. And if it's important and urgent, gets top priority, etc. I mean, it's relatively self-explanatory, but to have it broken down and really take that time to reflect on it, it's helpful. It's it was great for me planning for this webinar. I was able to bust that program back out and reflect on it a little bit more, and it inspired me. And I took it in 2015, actually. So it's nice how sometimes those things can kind of come back to light. I also found Toggle while I was researching around, which is a project management tool, a time management tool that you can use to your advantage. It had a lot of information and tips, many of which are similar to what I've shared this evening, but it's still good reading to follow up on. So what I want to do now is I'd like to turn it over to you, the attendees, the audience, and hear what questions do you have, or what ideas do you have, or do you have any advice on time management? We've got a little bit of time left, and I really want to make this something where we can share ideas or insights or challenges that we're having and kind of support each other.